Take me to Boston University. Good morning, Warzone kids. This is going to be my introduction to my How Do We Live playlist, I think. And I'm going to start it off with this little story about first time I set foot in Boston, Massachusetts when I went to college at BU. Take me to Boston University is what I said to the cab driver that picked me up at Logan Airport in January of 1994. And now it was in January, which ain't when you're supposed to start school. You're supposed to start in the eternal September. But my high school guidance counselor from Ulysses S. Grant High School in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, where I graduated in May or June of 1993, had failed to send in my paperwork to Boston University. So I could not start in September. I had to wait till January. And that was a grievous blow. I thought I had lost it. The most important thing in my life at that time was getting out of Oklahoma City and going to college at Boston University. I did not really know what college entailed. Neither of my folks went there. My mother did graduate high school, but I believe she may have done so in a reform school in St. Louis, Missouri. And Daddy got a GED in the Army. They didn't know nothing about college, but they wanted me to be able to go, and I appreciate that. And I signed up. I more or less picked BU out of a hat because I heard they had a good philosophy program and a good classics program, ancient Greek, and that's what I wanted to do. Because I had read those Narnia books of C.S. Lewis when I was a kid. And there's a line in there when old Professor Diggory Kirk says, "It's all in Plato. It's all in Plato. What are they teaching the youngsters these days?" And I did not know what Plato was, but I liked old Professor Diggory Kirk, and I wanted to learn whatever it was that he thought was so great in Plato. Because I could not stand the world I felt imprisoned in, the world of born-again Christianity. There were things I loved about it, but it all netted out to I wanted to get out of there, and I wanted to see something different. So it was January when I got to Boston, and I said, "Take me to Boston University," when I saw that cab driver. And he said, "Okay, sir, well, where exactly do you want to go?" And I said, "Boston University." I just said that. And he said, "Well, sir, BU is a big place. Where exactly do you want to go?" And I did not know. But I knew that it was a Friday afternoon, it was in January, and I did not know where I was supposed to sleep that night. And I had a little pamphlet about BU, and I said, "Well, take me to the housing office, 985 Commonwealth Avenue." And we did. So I went in there at about 4 o'clock when I got there, and I went in the housing office, and there's a black woman in there doing her thing. I stood in line, I made it to her office, and I said, "I'm Ben Johnson. Where do I sleep tonight?" And she said, "All right, sir, let me look you up." And she got on her computer. And she stayed on her computer. And she said, "Sir, I do not find you. Where is your housing deposit and your housing form?" My what? Housing application? I didn't know what she was talking about. Among the many things I didn't know really about going to college was that you had to make special arrangements with things like housing applications and preference forms and whatnot in order for them to let you live somewhere. I didn't know nothing about that. There's a special look that middle-aged black women in Boston have for 19-year-old white boys from Oklahoma who show up in their office at 4 o'clock on a frigid Friday afternoon in January with no place to live. She gave me that look. Then she pulled her glasses up on their chain and got to work. And she said, "Sir, This is a real problem. All my dorms are full. I can't find it. Oh, I got one room left. It is in the Russian House, 178 Bay State Road. The rooms in the Russian House are reserved for Russians. Are you Russian, sir? No, I'm not Russian. What is she talking about? I was raised by a vet in Oklahoma, and the Cold War was barely over. May as well ask me if I was a Klingon. Then she said, well, do you speak Russian, sir? No, I do not speak Russian. Crazy lady. She said, sir, this is the only room I have on my campus. Rooms in the Russian House are reserved for Russians, those studying Russian, or those interested in Russian culture. Are you interested in Russian culture, sir? And I got it. I said, yes, duh, I am interested in Russian culture. She said, good. Here's your keys. 178 Bay State Road. Your roommate's name is Boris. Boris, come on. Now I would know to say, Oi, Belyat! But Boris hadn't had a chance to teach me Russian cursing yet. And I made it to 178 Bay State Road in the Russian House. And I'm still friends with Boris. And I got to work. I was going to study ancient Greek philosophy. And that is why that story is starting off this How Do We Live playlist. Because that was a real life-altering experience for me, studying the world of ancient Greece and ancient Greek philosophy. Not because of some facts I learned. I learned plenty of facts. I learned that ancient Greek is not an easy language to learn. I learned it took a lot of work. I learned about the polis, and I learned about nature versus convention, and I learned about phalanxes, and I learned about demagogues, and I learned about the Melian dialogue, and I learned about all kinds of things like that, all kinds of facts. You can learn all the facts in the world, and they ain't going to alter your life. The thing that happened to me that was life-altering was that I had the privilege of having some extraordinary teachers at Boston University, and they exposed me to a philosophical cast of mind. They exposed me to what it's like to take a problem, an idea, and work it over. To read a book slow, and to read a book like there's treasure in it, but only if you find it. They showed me what it was like to have an idea and to think about it, and not just read the first 140 characters and say, yep, that's clever, thumbs up. But to think about it and think, now what does it mean if this idea is true? How could I tell? What would be the implications of this idea? What would it mean if this idea wasn't true? If this idea is true, what else is true? What does this mean? How do we think about it? What comes after this idea? What other ideas does this idea spring from? Maybe I need to learn about those. They exposed me to a philosophical cast of mind. And they exposed me to the idea that I could have an encounter with the minds and the hearts and the psyches of people that lived thousands of years ago, because they had taken the time to write them down and send them to me. And I had a professor that said, a Platonic dialogue is a conversation put in a bottle and cast in the ocean of time, which we then pick up, and we have a conversation with Plato, for example, who wrote a lot of dialogues. So being exposed to a philosophical way of ruminating over things, working ideas over, not giving up, looking at a book that's hundreds of pages long, or 10 pages long, or one paragraph long, or one sentence long, and thinking, what does this mean? And not giving up. Read it. The person that wrote this is a human being. If one human being can do it, another human being can do it. What does it mean? I'm going to read it until I crack it open and figure it out, or die trying, or at least get a D on the test. And that way of thinking, that way of working through the world is not really what you find in the world of social media these days. And it ain't what gets you a lot of clicks unless you're shoving ghost chilies up your butt or wearing a golden G-string or something like that, and I ain't going to do none of that. So that's all right with me. It is important to me to do my part to kind of, for people that don't have the opportunities I had, who know civilization and the world around them, mostly through memes and stuff like that pops up on your phone, or factoids about like how cool Sparta was, which it was, or how barbaric Sparta was, which it was, or how misogynistic and racist and fill in the blank with a bunch of other, terms of denigration that you like, the ancient world was, which it was, is, or what? Is the ancient world anything, or was it something? Whatever it was, it was. And I ain't saying that, I'm going to give you an A+ version of philosophical rumination, but I am going to try to do my very best. That's all I can do. So that's part of it. Part of why I'm doing this How Do We Live playlist, because it came to me through these teachers that when you look into the world of ancient Greek philosophy, I found that it was nothing at all like what I imagined philosophy would be like. Or you right now, if you go take a philosophy class or something, or you have an interest in it, and you hear modern philosophy, you hear names like Wittgenstein, Habermas, Heidegger, and, postmodernism and post-structuralism, and all that, and a bunch of complicated theories, stuff like that. The world of ancient Greek philosophy is nothing to do with that at all. It is a whole different animal. It is human beings trying to answer the question, how do we live? How should we live? How should we govern ourselves? What is it to live a good life? They were grappling with these things. And I had a professor who said, and I do not remember if he was quoting someone else or paraphrasing someone else, or if this is all 100% him. He said, we call it ancient philosophy. That is misleading. They were fresh and young. We are the ancient ones. Those ancient Greeks lived at a moment when human society, in our Western culture, I leave India out of it, I leave China out of it. Matter of fact, for these purposes, we leave Egypt out of it. Focus on this little corner of the Eastern Mediterranean with Greece and Rome and like that, and Greece. They were at a moment when their society, their civilization, their people had reached a level where they had cities and they had such things as division of labor, what with all their slaves. And And this meant that they had people that could live a life of leisure where they had time to do things like sit around and ponder on all this. And they were like young Homo sapiens, young human beings, our fellow human creatures, fresh and young, looking at rosy-fingered dawn as it comes up in the east in the morning, standing up, looking out over the savannah of the new world that Homo sapiens were living in, and them trying to figure it out. Man, did I love that idea. Woo! Still do. Nothing I like more than that, really, if you wanted to get right down to it. And I was turned on to that kind of mode, that philosophical mode of looking at things. Now that's part of it. Another part of it, the second part of it, last part of it, is I wanted badly to know some alternative to the born-again Christian world of Oklahoma City in the 1980s and 70s. I was born in 1974. I went to church with Jesus people, and I say that to draw a distinction between what, to those people I grew up with, they would have regarded as a lukewarm mess of hogwash, which was like people going to giant mega churches because it was a social thing to do, or people who were part of a mainline Protestant denomination just because that's what they did. These were Jesus people who came to God because their Jenga towers in life had collapsed and they sought an epiphany experience, and they worked hard at it. They threw themselves into it, a lot of those people. Those are Jesus people. The first Christians that you read about early in the Bible, they didn't go to Mass and fill out a little envelope and give their 10% to the church every week. They didn't go to church on Sunday because that's what you did on Sunday. They met informally in an upper room at the cost of potential torture and death because they wanted to know how to live in this world. And I'm a child sex abuse survivor. As an adult, I live with what they call borderline personality disorder. I'm a recovering addict and a bulimic. I live with assorted maladies like that. And I'm not going to separate those things out from these philosophical inquiry because I'm a human being and so is everyone else. And I need the upper room where those Christians met. I need, if you're going to tell me something about philosophy and you want me to pay any attention to it at all, it needs to mean something for human life. My human life. I need to be able to connect the dots and see how does that relate to me. The philosophy of the upper room. Jesus people. The philosophical version of that, right? I wanted to know, but I was born a captive, it kind of felt to me. I went to little Christian schools, I went to those Jesus people churches, and it was a real world. And I greatly appreciate what it's like to grow up in a world of those people that lived by a kind of a code and meant something. They were people of the book. They were people of the book. They were people of the Bible. When they asked themselves the question, how do we live? They got their answer from the Bible. So it was natural to me. It was smooth as butter to me when I learned about the culture. When I learned about the world of ancient Greece, I don't like the word culture. When I learned about the world of ancient Greece, and I learned that oftentimes when the ancient Greek person, let's say, wanted to know what to do, whereas we might go to a horoscope or something like that. To use an example, I do not go to the horoscope. As a Scorpio, I'm far too ornery to believe that the horoscopes mean anything. What do you think about that? In the ancient Greek world, what they would do is they would pull out the Iliad or the Odyssey, and they'd open that book up to a random page, or the scroll, whatever format they had it in, and they would point to a page, they would point to a word, point to a line. What does this have to say, right? Something like that. This is the story that I heard anyway. I do not know at what point there would have been anything like access to written Homer for people to look at. I do not know that. If you are a classicist, maybe you do know, please tell me in the comments, but take my point. That's an idea. And when I heard that idea, I knew exactly these are people of the book. I come from people of the book. When they wanted to know how to live, they looked at Homer, right? They didn't look at the Bible, they looked at Homer. So, I wanted to know what were the alternatives. Like, what would it mean to be in a world that was different than Christianity? I knew that Christianity got a lot of ideas in it. There's ideas about original sin. There's ideas about salvation. There's ideas about all kinds of things. We are saved by works, not through Christ. Do unto others that have others do unto you. As you've done it unto the least of these, my brethren, so you've done it unto me. All that. And all that. But I wanted to know what else was there. You cannot easily put yourself back in the world of the 70s and 80s with the radical poverty of information. Or, it was not ubiquitous. If I wanted to know something, and it wasn't in the set of 1985 World Book Encyclopedias that we had, and I had to go look it up, I just had to wait for the library to be open, and I had to get a ride to the library, and I had to look it up on microfiche machines to find out where the books I might want to read was. I had to go read it. Man, it was hard. You had to work for it. But what I got from the experience of being exposed to that world that's different than mine, everything's different. I'm going to wrap this up more in the future, more in the next pieces. But by seeing how radically different the world of the Greeks was, I saw more clearly what my own world was like. Because I saw many, many, many things that I would kind of take for granted. And then you see that there's another people that live somewhere else when it do things completely different and see things completely differently. Ooh, that's tough. It's challenging. We do it like this where I live in time in the 21st century, 20th century United States. I am a creature of the 70s and 80s in Oklahoma, in the heart of the Bible Belt, raised by Dust Bowl survivors from a family of Confederate refugees who made their way west out of Tennessee and Alabama and into Texas and up into Oklahoma. We are a rugged, ornery people of a harsh, arid land. And if you're into anthropology, you can imagine what kind of society, what kind of cultural values are there of people from a harsh, rugged, arid land who just came out of a famine. Those are my people. We can take a licking and keep on ticking. We ain't that friendly. We ain't that touchy-feely. It is very hard to believe that anything nice is going to last. Those are my people. I'm from there. And so to be exposed to the world of ancient Greece, of classical Athens, 5th century Athens, was to be shown a world full of human beings who I can tell by their writing are the same kind of creature that I am, but who lived in a different world than I lived in. A different world. Led me to question everything I could think of to question, everything I could see in front of me, so many things I thought were bedrock about how the world worked. Turns out, was just how we did it in McLeod, Oklahoma, in Pottawatomie County in 1979. Wow. Wow. So this playlist, How Do We Live? I'm going to fling my philosophical ruminations on here for them that are interested. Because it's not that easy to find yourself in front of a world-class, amazing teacher the way I did. Several of them at Boston University. It ain't that easy. And I'm not one of them, by no means. But I was influenced by them. And I hope that I absorbed some of what they had to offer by way of working things over like a dog with a bone. Or like someone that can work out intricate spatial entanglement puzzles. Or intricate Japanese wooden box puzzles. And to have a relationship with ideas and ways of thinking that's like a relationship with a puzzle, that you can work it over, that a dog can chew on that bone and find out what's there and get every last bit of meat off that bone. I love that. As much as I love anything in the world, I love that kind of activity. And I do not want it to perish from this earth. To be swamped over by people shoving ghost chilies up their butt and trying to figure out, what can I say to inflame people? What will make people the craziest? And there's a place for that, and whether there was or not, that's how it is. But that ain't the only thing that is. We can have a little corner of the world where we can do this kind of thing, So I'm going to do the best I can. It's a beautiful day, and I hope you join me if you like this kind of thing. I hope you join me. Interrupted my own ending. It's a beautiful day on the trail to the Western Lands. Rosy-fingered dawn is coming up over the same horizon that she rose over when she shone on Homer and Plato and Aristotle and Achilles and Patroclus and Archilochus and Heraclitus and Thales and Anaximander and Socrates and Alcibiades and Thucydides and Herodotus and Theaetetus. It is the same world, and we are the same things that they were. And today on the trail, all we can do is walk our miles. And we can walk them 1 league per hour, because that is the definition of a league. The distance you can travel in an hour, and that's all we can do, boys and girls. Let us be young in our humanity today. Let other people be the ancient ones, jaded, seen it all, been there and done that, got the t-shirt, can't be impressed, marvel at nothing. Let them have it. All irony all the time. Let them have it. I live with BPD. I burn hot. Let's be young in our humanity today, you and me. Let's be young human creatures looking at our life with fresh eyes. Let's see what we see on today's miles on the trail. Daylight's burning, Pilgrim. Let's get a move on.